6:1, let no one lead you away from this way of teaching, for he does not teach you according to God.
The God.
Is that what it says?
No, I mean, it's like,
Well, yeah, you're right.
you know, the God.
I like that, but that's not what it said. So.
And you and I were talking before class this morning about the Melchizedekian order, and that at the end, when Messiah came, he did away with it. And it isn't so much that he did away with it because of Torah. I mean, he fulfilled Torah, but it's the Talmud, it's the oral tradition that that the human rabbis have, did and are still currently injecting into the 300 and some odd laws.
Oh, yeah, well, actually, there's about 800 right now that they're trying to follow. And they can't, I mean, that's, I couldn't remember 800 things in a row if I, especially try to live by them.
Wow.
But, and that's the Levitical, but the Essenes were in control, and they're the ones that, when they got kicked out of the temple, they took the scrolls with them and hid them in the caves. And I heard quite a thing, there's a lot of caves. And what they're doing now, because they're still finding more stuff, is they have drones. And they're taking the drones because some of these caves, now it didn't used to be this way. The rock was soft and it's washed away, so it makes the caves higher. But they're propelling down with ropes, like mountain climbers, and it's kind of dangerous.
Yeah.
And so that's how they're getting into the caves. Well, in one lifetime, you can only see so many caves.
Right, right.
So they're sending drones in and seeing if this looks like a cave that something might be in. And also, what do they call those things in Rome? Under the ground where they buried people?
Catacombs?
Catacombs.
Yeah.
They had the catacombs there in the mountains. So what they're actually doing is in the catacombs, or graves,
Right.
however you want to term that, they're actually finding scrolls. And they found some here not too long ago, within the last couple of years, that were Greek, written in Greek instead of in Hebrew.
So they're more recent.
Yeah, well, they're more recent because the old ones were saved from the past. But if you remember, the Greeks came in, they taught Greek, and people were writing in Greek, and more educated people, so they were the ones that the Essenes probably did in Qumran. Because that was 144 years before Christ that they got kicked out of the temple and moved. So, and they was more closer to being a Christian because they look forward to the Messiah.
Well, they were looking for him.
They were looking for him, and they knew what the scriptures said about the coming Messiah. And the Levitical priest didn't push that issue. And of course, the Sadducees didn't even believe in resurrection.
Yeah.
So, but anyway, so there's at least 1,000, a minimum of 1,000 scrolls that they found.
Wouldn't it be great if we could find the scrolls?
Huh? What?
Wouldn't it be great if we could find the scrolls from the temple?
But that's what they are. See,
All those scrolls that they're
well,
finding?
what you have, excuse me, and I was just telling them, and I got a book, and I gave one to Pastor too, because I happened to wind up with two, because I bought 2 packages and I have them across. But the priest, Melchizedek, as I said once before, Melchizedek wasn't a person, it was an order. Okay, so the order of priests, the high priest would write messages to their sons, their own message, and then that would be saved from generation to generation to generation. So that's what they have found, was those old scrolls.
Wow.
Some of them, see, there's 1,000 scrolls, or over 1,000 they have found. Plus they found a whole bunch of fragments that are unreadable.
Right.
Plus they found a bunch of scrolls that are so old and weathered that they're turned into carbon. And you can't unroll them because they fall apart. However, they do have technologies now where they can like X-ray it
Yeah, yeah,
with turbo X-ray,
right,
whatever,
yeah.
to be able to read
Mhm.
what they say. So it's opening up a whole lot of things. Now, these Greek ones that they just found, from what I understand, they found a basket too, which is considered the world's oldest basket. But I have, what I understand is they have found these Greek writings that have not really added anything to the inventory of knowledge, except for the fact, and they haven't really gone through them all yet, places that words were skipped because it was unreadable before,
Mhm.
they might be able to fill in them words from the new manuscripts. And the more manuscripts they find, if
Right,
they
the
can
more
find things that are
complete.
duplicated,
Yeah.
even if they're in bad shape, maybe they're able to put them
Mhm.
together.
Yeah.
So, and this, of course, didn't come from the Dead Sea Scrolls, this came from that monastery.
Right,
But
but it just confirms.
it's so interesting when you dive into it, that what they're learning from the, we say Dead Sea Scrolls, but they're actually finding stuff in caves that are not at the Dead Sea. They're on up a ways away from the Dead Sea.
Different places
Yeah,
now.
uh-huh. So, but we still term it as Dead Sea,
Right, yeah. 'Cause
you
that's
know,
where the
kinda
first one came from.
incorrectly, but we do.
Come on in.
Good morning.
How are you?
Good. We just did.
Hello. Yeah, come on in, pull up a stool. I need to know what chapters you don't have. What chapter is your last chapter?
They're in that book.
We don't have a book. We don't have that book.
You don't?
Mm-mm. No, we
Oh.
never got one.
We'll
But
take
we
care of
do
that.
have the hard copy of the book
You have, okay.
at home.
Well,
So,
you
but
can-
we don't know where y'all are.
That one?
Mhm.
Oh,
There, that way you can tell
Thank you, sir.
whichever. You won't bite it.
That'll make it a little bit easier.
Boy, it's hard coming up with these half-inch ones.
Uh-huh.
There's no place, I bought the last ones, and I can come up with 1 inch, but them are getting sparse. So I don't know, I guess they're made in China, not coming over, I don't know. Anyway, we are on chapter 6, and those have everything in them up to 6.
Okay.
I mean, up to 9.
Oh, okay.
And we were just going over the Dead Sea Scrolls stuff, that they found a lot of, well, there's like 1,000 scrolls that are readable that they found. Some are, they can't open up because but there's technology now, they figure they can take pictures, x-rays, I don't know what, and be able to read some of it. And there are, they don't know how many scrolls because they have piles of fragments. And how do you sort it out and how do you know what's in there? Of course, they're trying, but nobody has an answer for that yet. But I never believed, never assumed that there was that many scrolls that were found, but they found them in like 13 different caves. And what I was just telling a minute ago was they're sending drones in to these caves to see if it's a cave worth investigating, because to investigate it, some of them you have to rappel down from the top to be able to get in, because that soft stone is washed away and now they're way up high, can't climb up because it's straight up and that type of stuff. So it's kind of dangerous and kind of time consuming, but that's how they're finding more. And it's not just in Qumran, they're finding them up the border too, up along the sea. So anyway, chapter 6:1, let no one lead you away from a way of teaching, from this way of teaching. For he does not teach you according to God. And Tom pointed out that it probably should say the God, but It's not what it says. So I printed it the way it came out. 6.2, has anybody got a comment on
I
that?
was just gonna show it's a way of teaching, so that means he's false in anything that he's telling you, right?
That, okay, when it says this way of teaching, what this way of teaching is being mentored by a Christian,
Mhm.
which wasn't called Christian at that time, it was the Children of the Way.
Right,
So they would be taught in a mentoring, which would take 1 to 3 years to mentor all the way through up to this point. And then the next chapter, this is like the completion of that training on that. Then our next chapter, we get into baptism, which is gonna surprise some people. And of what it says, but not as much as communion will surprise people. And so this is like the completion, chapter 6 is like the completion of the training. And then we get into, okay, now, if you're still a believer, now it's time to be baptized.
Take the next step.
And then the teaching is different. It's being, then a Christian is being taught. Right now, a non-Christian is being taught. Okay, I mean, they could have accepted Christ by now,
right.
but which hopefully they have, but still, it's the program, it's the teaching and what the teaching is.
Mhm.
So let no one lead you away from this way of teaching. So it's a mentor teaching the laws, the not laws, the rules of Christianity, if you want to put it that way. And if they're teaching something different, which in Egypt they got into something different because they got into mysticism, which mysticism teaching uses some of the same scriptures and more, but it's mystic,
Mhm.
it's different,
Right,
okay, is somewhat cultic. For he does not teach you according to God, in other words, and like Tom said, should say the God, but to God, I printed it the way it was, even every explanation point and comments the way it was. 6.2, for if you can hear the whole yoke of the Lord, you will be perfect. But if you cannot, do what you can. Now, does everybody know what a yoke is in Scripture?
the yoke,
A yoke. Now, we think of a yoke as the yoke of oxen with the wooden yoke
Yeah.
so that they pull together.
right,
Okay, a yoke is a way of teaching. Jesus said, my yoke is easy.
mhm.
Okay, my way of teaching is easy. When, I forget who it was, and you probably know, but he said, I'm glad I didn't baptize any of
That would be Paul.
that Paul said that, I'm glad I didn't baptize any of you, because back then, the people followed a mentor. Well, even just before these writings, people followed a mentor, which was called a rabbi. And that rabbi had his way of teaching. Maybe we call them denominations now, I don't know if it goes that serious, but, and there was like 6 different groups of Jews too, but they had their way of teaching and what they taught in their interpretation of Scripture.
Which they still
And
do.
that was their yoke.
Yeah.
So when that rabbi baptized a person, he was baptizing that person into
His
that
way of
rabbi's yoke,
Mhm.
way of teaching. And that's what a yoke is. Okay? And I know there, you've all heard sermons of all kinds of different things with yoke, and I've heard one where it's the thing you put on your shoulder to carry the master and all that. And some of those might be good, but the real thing is yoke is a form of teaching.
Gee, have we found anyone perfect yet?
Uh-huh,
We have?
yeah, Jesus.
Well, beside him.
I knew that was coming.
Reading what it says right here, that if you can bear it, then you will be perfect. So I'm saying, okay, have we found anybody perfect yet?
And, but if you cannot, do what you
You
can.
right.
And some of the denominations that I knew when I was growing up was if you washed your car on Sunday, I mean, that was a sin. You're flat out going to hell, you know. So I talked to my pastor at the time about that. He says, well, you're not supposed to work on Sunday. Now, is washing your car something that's fun for you to do, or is that work?
Yeah.
You're not supposed to work, but if you enjoy doing it, course. 16-year-old, you know, getting a new car, yeah, keep that thing shining.
And you could say it was something you didn't have to do, you wanted to do it.
Right.
Right.
You wanted to get out there and wash it.
Right, in other words, what he was kind of saying was, let's not get legalistic about
Right.
this.
Yeah.
Let's look at things with common sense, you know. Yeah, you're not supposed to go out and plow your fields, but if your ox falls in a ditch, what are you gonna do? You're gonna save it.
Sure.
You know, I mean, Jesus said that, so.
Again, that's judging.
That's what,
That would be judging.
yeah,
I don't find it fun to wash the car anytime, you know, but if.
but your boyfriend did when he was
Right.
16.
If they find it enjoyable to go wash the car, then what difference does it make whether it's on Sunday or Tuesday?
Yeah,
I think it all depends on the circumstances. Now, like her talking about the car and you saying the ox in the ditch, that's more important, the ox in the ditch, than her getting out and washing the car.
right.
Well, no, that, it depends on the person though.
No, it's not that important to get out and wash your car.
Yeah, it may be to me.
Oh,
Well, it depends on how dirty the car is
Right.
and what date you have that night.
Right.
You know,
Yeah.
yeah, all right, okay.
So what about a deer laying in your front field this morning?
The what now?
We had a deer, a doe. As we was coming out of the driveway, coming to church, we noticed some big birds
Oh,
in the
no.
grass, and she Kathy said, there's something laying there, maybe it's a goose. So as we got around and we stopped and got out up on top of the truck looking, it's a doe. I know, I can't talk without my hands. But anyway.
That's
so-
okay, yeah.
So she had to get maybe hit by a car, because she's laying out in the middle of our field, you know, a 4-acre field, in about 18-inch grass. But we barely saw her, but first words out of her mouth as we turn out on the road,
We could go butcher
We
a
could go
deer.
butcher a
She's
deer.
still warm.
so, well, do we stop and go back and walk through 18, you know, grass
Yeah.
almost 2 feet tall and our, you know, halfway dressed up, and
Yeah.
see if she's still hot, warm, cold, or stiff? Have the birds already been eating on her?
Right.
So I just kept driving. So
Yeah. Let the birds
So we
finish.
still have to deal with the carcass when we
Yeah,
get home,
or
so.
whatever, yeah, so.
Of course,
There
then
was,
it'll be
there
too
was an
late.
interesting, I forgot which church it was, but of the 7 churches, the town that the one was from, that Jesus said, you know, you're kind of doing things right, but you're cold, you're dead, you're really dead. Well, that town, and God said he would come against that city, which he did, because it was impenetrable. The walls were thick and everything, but somebody from an elevated point seen somebody come through a trap door and then went back in. And so they found the opening to go in and they took over the city.
Yeah.
They did take the city out.
Like
Well, then the
David-
city
like
was
David.
taken out a second time, and the reason it was taken out a second time was because the enemy seen buzzards flying. And what they was, when they investigated, they found dead bodies.
There.
And the city, you're familiar with this? And the city would take the dead bodies and throw them over the wall.
Mhm.
And then the buzzards would come in and eat the bodies. And they also found that that part of the wall was not protected. They had protection for their army, but not against that wall. So they went in over that wall and took the city a second time.
Look at that way.
Yeah, several years later. Just a piece of history.
Yeah.
6:3, and concerning food, bear what you can, but carefully stay away from food sacrificed to idols, for it is the worship of dead gods.
Sure.
And again, this is kind of like the final teaching to the Gentiles that have went through
Yeah.
this training. Don, would you give that to him?
I've got one.
You did, you found it? Or you got,
I got one last time.
you need another one?
No. Don's got one.
You didn't find your Bible though?
No. This is not what I'm talking about, that other book that you gave me. That-
Oh, that other book is what's missing, okay.
Sorry to interrupt you.
106.
6:03.
We're just finishing up 6. She said she was gonna give a timer, but I don't have a timer.
It's 10 o'clock.
6:3, concerning, which I just read, I know. Concerning food, bear what you can, but carefully stay away from food sacrificed to idols, for it is the worship of dead gods. And so this, to me, this teaching is teaching that, excuse me, it's okay to eat pork, still eat bacon.
Yeah.
Even though pork was forbidden for the Israelites,
Yeah.
this is a teaching to the idols, a teaching to the Gentiles that maybe that's not all that bad. Maybe that it's more important not to eat food that's sacrificed
Right,
to idols.
what the food was for, as opposed to what the food is.
Yeah,
Well, and I brought up the fact that if you're going to be a disciple, an apostle, and you're going to go to another area of the world, and that's all they've got,
yeah.
I mean, how are you supposed to eat if you're forbidden to eat it? So, I
You
mean.
gotta eat what's put before you.
Right, exactly.
Yeah.
So
I
is
had
it-
one time where I was kind of afraid to eat, but then when they told me something was eggplant,
Yeah.
so I feasted on eggplant.
What types of food would be sacrificed to idols? Any kind?
Well,
Whatever they chose, or?
I think that it's not a thing of that type of food that is sacrificed to idols, but that it is the actual food that
It
is
was for the
sacrificed to
sacrifice.
idols.
Like the Levites would eat the food from the temple.
Yeah. I think there's multi levels of that understanding. Like you said, there's surface and there's other things, but like you said, there was things that were offered, but they weren't offered to idols. That
Right.
was offered
To God, right,
And they were okay to eat that.
right.
But in their society, there was many other gods that were sacrificed to.
Mhm.
When they
Right.
went in the marketplace, there was some that they wanted to buy that because they worshiped those other gods. And so they were either, I mean, let's even think, the Muslims have to have an animal killed in a certain way
Mhm.
and stuff like that.
Oh,
And-
wow.
Well, the Jews do too, it has to be
Yeah.
kosher.
That's what I'm
Yeah.
saying. And as much as we get critical about that, they're that way too, like I said. But the better meat that you have is one that's bled out. And that's one thing that they got really about. I mean, and I'm not saying you couldn't eat anything if you weren't hungry, whatever. But I've never seen anybody want to eat a buzzard.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying?
Right.
You know what I'm saying?
Absolutely.
Right.
And
Well-
there's certain animals that we don't incline ourselves to,
Mhm.
and
Like
That
some countries eat horse meat.
Yeah.
We
And
don't
it's-
eat horse meat because it
and it's
doesn't have a
good.
split hoof.
And it's good,
and
You
there are
did?
things that are
Yeah.
accepted and not accepted,
yeah,
you know, whatever.
Well,
in certain
okay, I
places.
know,
Yeah.
yeah.
it's good, it's very
Well,
good.
isn't it true they say we should eat the animals that only eat grain or
Grass,
Right, you
yeah.
don't eat predatory animals.
we should eat animals that are carnivores? One animal will eat another animal. We're not supposed to eat those. Or
Right, and we're not supposed to eat like bottom feeders. See, like really
Right.
catfish is a bottom
Catfish
feeder.
is a bottom feeder, yeah.
Right.
Lobsters.
I love crawfish, so.
Yeah,
I like going to the mall and get some
I
crawfish.
mean,
And you like that too, huh?
scallop, hey,
No,
they just
but
went.
that's what I thought when I read that.
crawdads will be,
It was a priest,
yeah,
But
shrimp.
if you think about the crustaceans, though, what do? They're like the buzzards of the ocean, they
Yeah,
clean
they're-
up the floor.
they're vacuums.
And that's, even the pigs and stuff, we're talking about pork, in that culture, they had places set aside and they fed the pigs human waste. That was their sewer system.
Mhm.
Well,
So-
yet today, some of them
Yeah.
feed
Right.
chicken waste to
I,
pigs.
I used
Some of
to
the
like that,
corporations are
Yeah.
what
feeding
is tilapia fish?
Yeah.
tilapias.
But when I found out how they're feeding some of them, I didn't want really any.
Oh, yeah, I won't
A
eat
lot of them are-
tilapia, huh?
have their
Most
bird
Mexican
cages over
restaurants are using
The
tilapia.
ponds, and the fish are eating the waste of the birds, and then they ship it over here, and we're, yeah, that's cheap,
This is
let's
really
eat some of that.
great.
But, but I don't, if I know that the tilapia is from China, then I don't usually.
Right.
Yes,
yeah.
no.
But it's,
Well,
do you know
was-
where anything has been that you eat? Some of you do, but some of you don't, but yeah. But-
Was anybody here that was here the time I taught about Decapolis? The area of Decapolis? Okay, Decapolis, if you remember, Jesus went into the area of Decapolis, which was where he encountered the man in the tombs that couldn't be chained up.
Right.
Mhm.
Okay, that's the area of Decapolis, which consisted of about 12 cities in that area that all worshiped pagan gods and things like this. And if you remember the story, I'm sure, where the legend, all the demons asked to be sent to the pigs.
Mm-hmm.
Instead of being cast out into outer darkness, they was asked to be given to the pigs, of which they were, but things didn't turn out right because the pigs went and drowned themselves. Okay, well, they have found, years back, they found a altar that was for sacrificing swine to their gods. Now, I have a picture of this, and I showed a picture then, and this altar is in Vatican right now, is in the Vatican Museum, stuff like that. I didn't see it personally, but from what I understand, it's in the Vatican. So the theory is that the demons that were being cast out into the pigs thought, okay, when they get re-sacrificed, they can, in their temple, they can go back into the people, and it would just be a cycle. And that's where, when they jumped into the
Put an end to that.
water, yeah, it kind of messed things up for what their plan was for being
Wow.
recycled. So, but I mean, that was a, and also, if you remember, I think this was just before the Maccabees, that they sacrificed pigs on the altar in the
Yeah,
temple
Mhm. Right.
Well-
to show that they were taking over, you know.
Yeah. It was,
Like last week's sermon,
it was when they
the
destroyed the temple.
Muslims like to take over Christian things to show that they're a dominant force.
Right,
Yeah.
And so,
that we conquered it.
yeah, so they sacrificed a pig on the altar for the same purposes, so to speak. To
A lot of
show-
it is how you look at things.
It's all perspective.
But it is a personal thing, what you eat and
Mm-hmm.
stuff, and we all, I like, but I don't like that saying, this is you are what you eat. Because
Yeah, I know.
sometimes I are.
Yeah.
But,
That's
but,
true.
yeah. I mean, you inspect fruit and stuff and you understand, but there's a lot of times things are maybe thrown out that aren't really totally bad, but
They're
yeah,
not bad.
yeah, but there's things that you can't sell and they would last and things
Right.
too. But, the thing you brought out is something that I thought about a lot, about when they desecrated the temple. One of the things that they did was they sacrificed a pig on the altar. And when they destroyed the temple in 70 AD, they not only did that, but Jesus even foretold them, prophesied basically, and he was a prophet, that one day the blood would run out of the temple over the threshold of the temple with their blood. And it would be mingled with the blood of sacrifices offered to other gods. And that's exactly what happened in 70 AD. They were sacrificing a pig on the altar to desecrate the altar. But they were so mad, the Romans were, they brought people out and sacrificed them on the altar, stacked them up like cordwood on the altar, and slaughtered them too. And the blood did flow through the threshold of the temple, the blood of the people and the blood of the
And-
pig
yeah.
mingled together. And so there's things there you can look at, and how do you deal with that? If we are the temple of the Holy Spirit, and we are, spiritually, then I tried not to, just me personally, I'm not saying, don't be like me, because it's not a fun life all the time, okay? But for the most part, in my mind,
Don't desecrate
I'm
them.
trying not to do that.
Right.
Now, okay, yesterday they brought us a salad, and it had some chopped bacon in it. I didn't make a big deal out of it, and I ate it, okay? But I don't go out and buy those type of things. But I know they're not as good for me as other things, but I don't eat a lot of meat anyway, most of the eggs on a sandwich anyway.
And you don't get hysterical and say, take the
Right.
salad back, I don't want you.
You can be offensive too.
Mhm.
That's something that I'm looking now, even at, I'm looking at a teaching that's developing in my mind about the heart of the Torah. Not just the acts or the behavior or the do's and the don'ts, but what is the heart of this?
Yeah.
And I think we have neglected to guard our hearts
Yeah, the protection,
and to guard somebody else's
yeah,
heart.
protect.
And if we don't care about their heart and we just do whatever and become offensive, we are not drawing people into the kingdom. Same way, if I don't guard my heart and just whatever and allow myself to be hurting or whatever, then it's not good for me either.
Mhm.
And
You look at,
come down to one of the main reasons I stopped with pork was every time my doctor said something about my cholesterol, he'd say, "Why's your cholesterol? What have you been eating?" "Oh, I forgot, I was eating some ham biscuits every day this week," and, you know, didn't think about it. But some of those things, they do affect your health.
Right.
So,
Mhm.
yeah. I'm not saying it will kill you or send you to hell, don't get me wrong in any way. But there are some foods that are better than
But the
others.
thing, and especially like pork back then, pork has parasites in it.
Yeah.
And if it's not heated proper,
Yeah.
Right.
then
Even-
you're taking parasites.
And as much as I used to love seafood, I don't really eat that much anymore. I saw a thing where it had 2 tanks of, one was really murky water, the other one was too, but they put these oysters in it. And in about a few hours, it was all clear. But that's their job, is they clean up
That's
the
what they're
water.
supposed to do, yeah.
And then you forget that you're eating the filter.
The junk, yeah.
Yeah,
I
man.
ain't never had an oyster in
As
my
much
life.
as I like the taste of liver, I don't eat it that much
I eat
anymore
too much
because I know it's a
sometimes.
filter. Your liver filters out all your blood and stuff too. And I always liked the liver, but now I'm a little iffy on that because that's kind of like eating the filter again to me. But I'm not saying, it's just things to think about. But I think that's what he's getting into. If you don't know that food has been offered to that, then, you know,
It ain't gonna affect you one
just
way.
because somebody roasted a goat don't mean, you know, you couldn't eat it if you didn't, you know.
Yeah.
Some of them would sacrifice a goat, but goat's not too bad. I've tried it, and it's really not that bad if it's done right. But-
Yeah.
yeah, perspective is, you know, what you have to look at from perspective. But in getting, you know, and I'm gonna piggyback on what Greg said, but if your perspective, you know, hurts the other person, then maybe you need to take a look at That, and Paul actually said, you know, as far as eating meat, you know, if it's, you know, not sacrificed to other gods or on altars to other gods, that's fine. But if your action causes your brother to be offended or stumble, then lay off the meat and everything until you're away from them and everything, and then have it, because, you know, you can follow the law and everything. Well, this is law, I can do this and everything. But if you've offended, or if you cause a brother or sister to stumble, then you blow the whole thing out of perspective, and you're back to square one.
Right, but they did say, do not eat meat with the blood in it.
Absolutely, yeah.
And nowadays, when you buy meat,
Absolutely,
commercial meat, when you buy meat, you buy by the pound.
Yeah, and the
or
blood's
ounce,
still in
whatever.
there.
And blood is pounds and ounces.
Absolutely.
And so what they're doing is they're killing animals electrically now,
And that just freezes the blood.
which freezes the blood in the veins. So if you buy meat in a store, you really need to leave it set in water for a few hours to get that blood out of it. Because,
Absolutely.
of course, if you have it done, like I take stuff used to anyway over to Paris, to the Mennonites.
To the
and- yeah,
to the Yoder
they-
boys.
Right, yeah.
And they would, vet them or right.
Yeah, there's other ones too, it's just how it happens. in
Yeah, I know those guys well too.
So,
But you've ate a lot of deer meat, you know it tastes different.
Oh, well, when we butcher one, we soak it in salt water for 24
And
hours.
Yeah.
I would,
In ice salt
I would
water.
love to buy every piece of deer meat you got if you do that, because there's nothing
We
much
don't
better
eat it
when it's
until,
done right.
that's where it goes.
Yeah.
Soak it.
When she
I know.
cuts it off, it drops in a,
So
I know a guy that used to do that,
and
and
then
when his meat was ready to put in the
put it
freezer,
in
it was
a,
almost white.
a vinegar and
He did
water.
that 4
so
times.
let it,
It's definitely a different
cool.
color.
And it would melt,
Let it
when
set in
she gets,
vinegar
it would
and
melt
water.
in your mouth.
Absolutely,
Yeah,
yeah, and that tenderizes it, and that takes.
Oh, really?
that
No, nobody ever
that,
complains
that's
if
a
you do
new
it
one
that
to
way.
me, that's the water.
We
is
do the
salt
same
water.
thing with butcher.
Blood out.
Yeah.
yeah.
Okay, I guess our time is up for the day. Next week, we're gonna have an interesting discussion, and I'm just gonna read the first one, 7:1 today. Concerning baptism, because now we've brought everybody up to baptism. Okay, concerning baptism, baptize in this way, having first said all these things, immerse in the name of the Father and the Son and the Holy Spirit in flowing water.
Flowing water. Oh.
And then we'll get into more stuff deeper, because it does back off from that. In other words, it's not the letter of the law, it's the intent.
Living water.
So,
Yeah.
we're gonna find next week to be interesting, I
Give
believe.
me goosebumps.
But you could do
Oh, you
that.
remember the joint?
I've been baptized 3 different ways. Once by sprinkling, once in a baptismal, and then in the Jordan, which is a flowing water.
Me too.
You too?
I
Yeah.
I was sprinkled, then I was baptized in a swimming pool, but nobody could swim in for about a month after we done the baptisms.
Really?
On a Sunday afternoon, our Bible study, we met out at church and did some baptisms in the Ruby's pool, the pool, and the water was so nasty, they couldn't swim in it for 2 or 3 weeks. It was nasty,
Really?
yeah, so I was a nasty person.
That was all that
Then I got baptized.
Oh, that's
You know, we did one time, we took a horse tank out to the farm, and we had a get-together out to the farm, and we was gonna baptize a couple people. Wound up, about 10 people got baptized that day in the horse tank in the backyard.